So, Sasha Banks is the new WWE Raw Women's Champion. Yes, it actually happened. We did make a preview video on Monday discussing about the possibility that Sasha Banks could be the new Raw Women's Champion. The championship could change hands on Monday, and we weren't wrong. That's exactly what WWE did, and they made the change Monday night on Raw. Now, for those not aware, going into Monday Night Raw, it was the big hype, wasn't it? This is the big match we're going to have, that Sasha Banks will be going up against Asuka to decide who was truly the real Raw Women's Champion, even though it was Asuka after their weirdness at the Extreme Rules pay-per-view. But for those who weren't aware or have been living under a rock, or certainly not been on social media, because if you mention this on social media, man, do you get a reaction if you mention this on social media. My word. I mentioned this, like my thoughts on it on social media, and got called immediately a whiner, a complainer. God, what do you complain about everything? Blah, blah, blah. Just, the thing is, when it comes to wrestling social media now, people are very, very angry. So that's what that was. But because of what happened to Extreme Rules, we had Asuka defending the Raw Women's Championship against Sasha Banks. And myself included, I thought, like most people, I think, thought that Asuka was going to win this one. I assumed the plan was to have Asuka as the Raw Women's Champion for a long time, have a long championship reign, that kind of thing going forward, but that wasn't the case. Similarly to her Backlash defense of the Raw Women's Championship against Nia Jax, we had a screwy finish, and that was the case at Extreme Rules, because at Extreme Rules we had Asuka have Sasha Banks in the Asuka lock. Sasha Banks taps out, but the referee's distracted by Bayley. Then Asuka lets go of Sasha Banks out of the Asuka lock. She goes to spray the green mist, which is a disqualifiable offense anyway. But she sprays the green mist, and it goes into the eyes of the official, which then leads him to be blinded and him to be down. Bayley comes in, hits Asuka with the WWE Women's Tag Team Championship bout. Asuka's out. Sasha Banks gets on top. There's no referee to count the three because he's been blinded. He's been blinded by the mysterious green mist. Whatever in that green mist substance, whatever is in there, it's blinded the poor referee. So he's down. So Bayley thinks on her feet, if you want to call it that, on her feet she decides, I'm going to take the referee's shirt off. The shirt off his back, and count the 1, 2, 3, Paul Heyman style at Extreme Rules, or rather One Night Stand 2006, ECW One Night Stand 2006, and then counts to 3, forces the timekeeper to ring the bell, and we have Sasha Banks as the Raw Women's Champion, or the self-appointed, self-proclaimed Raw Women's Champion, whatever you want to call her. So that was the case for Sasha Banks. And then obviously they're all saying the storyline after that is, Sasha Banks, you're not the Raw Women's Champion. What are you talking about? Of course you're not the real Raw Women's Champion, blah, blah, blah. Which then leads Stephanie McMahon to appear on the screen last week on Monday Night Raw and say, we're going to determine a real Raw Women's Champion. We're going to have a real Raw Women's Champion next week on Monday Night Raw. We're going to have Asuka versus Sasha Banks for the Raw Women's Championship. What I didn't get in that is that her rationale for that, Stephanie McMahon, was, well, even though Sasha Banks, you didn't win the Raw Women's Championship, Asuka, you didn't win the match either. What happened to the champion's advantage then? What happened to the champion's advantage? Because in my opinion, what truly happened there then is that Asuka was disqualified. You spray green mist in the referee's face. Isn't that a disqualifiable reason for the ref to call off the match? And therefore, because Asuka is the Raw Women's Champion, she retains the championship. She loses the match, but she retains the championship because the championship can't change hands by disqualification. Well, that rule would change. Stephanie McMahon said that the match between Asuka and Sasha Banks on Monday Night Raw this week, to prevent any interference from happening from the likes of Bayley and Kairi Sane and whoever, that the championship could change hands by pinfall, submission, count out, and disqualification. Which then, again, even going into that, I was under the assumption, okay, that just prevents Bayley getting involved, so Sasha Banks is going to take a pinfall or she's going to tap out to the Asuka lock. That makes the most sense there. But they didn't go with that either. They actually went with the title change of Sasha Banks becoming the Raw Women's Champion, we predicted it on the preview video that we posted on Monday night purely because of the side plates. The side plates are the clue. The side plates are always the clue into what is going on. Because WWE is taping multiple episodes of Raw and SmackDown at the same time right now, so they're taping 2 episodes of Raw on a Monday and then 2 episodes of SmackDown on a Tuesday. They did the same last week, so they taped last week's Raw and this week's Raw last Monday, and then the following night on the Tuesday they taped last week's SmackDown and this week's SmackDown. So obviously they taped the title change the day before they did the SmackDown tapings. Well, on the SmackDown tapings on last week's edition of Friday Night SmackDown, Sasha Banks was out there. She had the Raw Women's Championship, but they had Asuka's side plates on it. Well, obviously the side plates have to be changed because this week on SmackDown, Sasha Banks is going to have the Raw Women's Championship, but it's got to reflect that she is the new Raw Women's Champion. So she had the side plates changed. However, it would appear that between having these side plates changed and filming the second episode of SmackDown, Sasha Banks had a little bit of a photo shoot backstage, and she posted this photo of her with the Raw Women's Championship and the WWE Women's Tag Team Championship. And the online sleuths, you can't get anything past a pro wrestling fan. If we've learned anything from this, you can get nothing past a pro wrestling fan, and that was evidenced by the likes of Gary Cassidy from Sportskeeda, a fellow Sportskeeda brother, that the side plates have changed. So people naturally were saying, wait a minute, why have the side plates changed when we haven't had a title change yet? Could this mean that the title was changing hands on Monday Night Raw? And that's exactly what happened. The title changed hand on Monday Night Raw. We had the match. The match itself was fine. It was, again, going into it, I had no qualms about the match because Sasha Banks vs. Asuka is a great match. When has it not been a great match? It's always been a great match. The thing that I had an issue with, and it's been an issue, God, I mean, how long have you got? But it's been an issue for a while, certainly, especially the last couple of months. It's been really, really noticeable the last couple of months, was the creative and the finishes. The whole horror show at Extreme Rules pay-per-view was marred, in my opinion, by bad finishes. Bad finishes that made no sense, were shoehorned in to try and get your silly angle over, came at expense of what was a good match, and just ruined a lot of potentially good matches. And that's been a major problem for WWE, in my opinion, at least over the last month or so, but I mean, you can trace this back for quite a while. But some of the finishes were just terrible. And I mentioned this during the Extreme Rules post-show, and I think it's worth mentioning here as well. A finish is so important when it comes to pro wrestling because a pro wrestling match is like any good television show or a television series. You can have the best intro, so the intros would be their entrances to the ring and the ring introductions by the ring announcer. That can be your intro. They can be perfect. The body of the match can be perfect. So the body of a match is equivalent to all the episodes in the TV series. But the finish is your season finale. The finish is the episode that the season finishes on, and ultimately is what everyone is talking about and hooks them in to watch the next season, or hooks them in to carry on watching your pro wrestling product, or hooks them in to watch and want the rematch. That's exactly what a finish is. Arguably, the finish is the most important point of the match. The finish tells the story that you're looking to tell in terms of the storyline, but it also ties the match up in a perfect bow and keeps the fans wanting more. And for the last few weeks, when it comes to WWE, and maybe it's a bit longer, maybe it is a bit longer when it comes to these bad finishes, the finishes of the matches have just been nonsensical, lacking creative. They don't tell the story. If anything, they just confuse you even more. They ruin what is a good match. It's important for a finish, in my opinion, as well, to complement the match and not be a complete 180 to whatever the match is trying to tell. And again, Monday Night on Raw, that's what it felt like to me. Obviously, I'm a bit disappointed about Asuka losing the Raw Women's Championship, but it was the way that it happened, and it felt silly and didn't make a lot of sense, in my opinion. Now, for those who weren't watching Monday Night Raw, and there was only 1.6 million of you live, which is a slight improvement from a couple of weeks ago, but it looks like 1.6 million and 1.5 million is the norm for Monday Night Raw now, which should be concerning for WWE. We were having the match between Asuka and Sasha Banks in the ring, and then we cut to backstage and we see SmackDown Women's Champion Bayley attacking Kairi Sane. Of course, Kairi Sane is tag team partners with Asuka. I say is, more like was now, because she is leaving the WWE to move back to Japan to be closer to her husband and her friends and her family. So Bayley's attacking Kairi Sane backstage, just mercifully beating her down. Then Asuka has a choice to make. Does she stay in the ring, or does she go backstage to fight for her friend, or should she stay and fight for the Raw Women's Championship? She decides, like the dumb babyface that she is, because again, babyfaces can't be cool. They have to be stupid and they have to do what's right. She goes backstage to save Kairi Sane from the beatdown by Bayley, but this leads to a count out, of course, as per the stipulations in the match by Stephanie McMahon. The championship can change hand by count out, which leads to Sasha Banks winning the match and therefore winning the Raw Women's Championship in the process. Now, the finish, look, some people are going to say, well, the finish protects Asuka, and yeah, of course it does, because she didn't take a pinfall. She didn't lose, you know, in the traditional sense, because she wasn't pinned or she wasn't submitted. However, in my opinion, it does hurt Asuka because it made her look stupid, and stupid, in my opinion, is just as bad as looking weak and losing the match by being cleanly beat by someone you were expected to beat. If anything, it's worse, right? Would you rather look tough and just lose it to a better competitor, or would you rather look stupid? And in my opinion, that's what it looked like. It felt stupid. People will say, how does it lack logic? Because the pre-match stipulations were there, and I do agree with that to a point. You set out your stipulations. You kind of told us the finish going in. So why are we so angry about the outcome, or why are you so angry about the outcome? And I'll tell you why I wasn't happy with that outcome. It's more the way that Asuka has been booked ever since she became Raw Women's Champion. That's my issue with this whole thing. It's not necessarily the match itself and this finish. There are a lot of Sasha Banks stans on social media that if you say for a minute that you thought that it was a bad decision and Asuka should have won the match or whatever, you will get hunted down. And like Liam Neeson in Taken, they have a particular set of skills and they will take you down if you say one bad thing about their precious Sasha Banks. So I won't do that here, because I'm a fan of Sasha Banks. She is a tremendous worker, and her and Bayley have been absolutely brilliant in 2020. And as the women's tag team champions, there isn't a better female tag team on the roster right now. You can't argue with that. And it's an interesting storyline, an interesting direction for them to go in. You just can't argue that point. The thing that annoys me when it comes to Asuka is that ever since she won or was given the Raw Women's Championship, she has just been booked horrifically. I mean, absolutely horrifically. So she wins the Money in the Bank, the briefcase at the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. Why did she win that? Well, she won that because she got over. During the Empty Arena shows earlier this year, not only was nobody ready for Asuka, nobody could touch Asuka. She was just that good during that period of time. There was so much confusion and so much, we don't know what's going on. Are WWE going to be able to run shows? What is it going to look like with no fans? The atmosphere sucks. It's a difficult to watch show anyway, let alone with no fans, etc., etc. Those are the conversations that were being had. But Asuka was the shining light. Monday Night Raw, her promos were just always spot on, fantastic. They didn't need to be in English. They were just great. And her matches speak for herself. Asuka's a tremendous in-ring worker. You can't discredit what she can do in the ring. Her matches were great too. And then the whole character, the rounded character of Asuka, just really started to come into its own, and she was the best part of the show. Even at some points, even in matches where she had nothing to do with it. I think she went out on Monday Night Raw during an Andrade match against someone, and she was put on commentary just to speak Japanese. Why? Because it was more entertaining than the match. It added atmosphere. It was something interesting to watch. WWE was struggling to know what to do during these empty arena shows during the pandemic, and I'm not going to criticize them for that. It's a very confusing time, and it certainly was then. But they put Asuka out on commentary for these matches because she was interesting, and she was entertaining, she was compelling. And eventually she got over with the audience, even though there wasn't any audience physically there. She got over with the audience at home. So when the Money in the Bank contract came up, she won it. And obviously because of Becky Lynch's pregnancy and her going on maternity leave, she was given the Raw Women's Championship. And people went, okay, it makes the most sense. Asuka is the one that can pick up where Becky Lynch has left off. She's probably the biggest babyface female wrestler on the Raw roster right now. It makes the most sense. We'll have a long Asuka championship reign and really elevate Asuka to a next level that she was at when she was in NXT. Because obviously the run that she had in NXT is mythic. She never lost. Unbeaten for, was it like 900 and something days? It was just crazy. It won't be done again. Female competitor of the year, overall competitor of the year. Only other person to do that, by the way, is Kairi Sane, which is interesting. But yeah, that was the point. Okay, right. Everyone was ready for Asuka at that point because they were ready to see her shine. And what happens? She's booked strongly for a couple of weeks while Paul Heyman is still in charge. And I don't want to turn this into a Paul Heyman versus Bruce Pritchard thing, or was Asuka a Paul Heyman project, because I don't think that's necessarily completely the case. I think Vince McMahon was also a big fan of Asuka and might still be. I mean, we don't know. He can sour on things very quickly. But after then, she had a couple of interactions with Nia Jax on Raw, because that was going to be the next feud. It was going to be Asuka versus Nia Jax. She has a couple of interactions with Nia Jax on Raw, just completely floors her. It's not even close. Attacks her backstage, attacks her in the ring, easy peasy. Then you had Charlotte Flair come back to Monday Night Raw after losing the NXT Women's Championship. We need something for Charlotte Flair to do. She can't be doing nothing, even though she's going to be going away off television sometime soon. We can't have her doing nothing. Are you kidding me? It's Charlotte Flair, the Charlotte Flair. She needs to be doing something. I am interacting, or pretending rather, to be Vince McMahon there. So Asuka then has a little bit of a feud with Charlotte Flair whilst she is also feuding with Nia Jax heading into Backlash. So what happens? Of course, Charlotte Flair beats Asuka clean on Raw. Your Raw Women's Champion is defeated clean-ish by Charlotte Flair on Raw. Strike number one, bad booking. And I know people will say, well, Nia Jax got involved, but she still lost. That's still your champion doing jobs on Raw. No, don't have that. I'm not having that. So we get to the pay-per-view. We have Backlash. People are thinking, well, it's Asuka's first defense of the Raw Women's Championship. She's facing off against Nia Jax. It's meant to be a big opponent for her to overcome. It's her first championship defense. Logic would suggest that she beats her, not completely emphatically, but she gets over the hump. Right? What is a difficult title defense? She manages to do it. And she sets herself up for a long championship reign. Looks like a fighting champion. Looks like a credible champion. And we see a good Raw Women's Championship reign for Asuka coming forward after that. So what happens? We get to the pay-per-view, Backlash, Nia Jax versus Asuka, match, whatever, finish, double count out. What? When I saw it at the time, my head nearly exploded. A double count out? You kidding me? In your first championship defense, you're not good enough to beat your first opponent? So right from there, again, another strike. She's just lost to Charlotte Flair a couple of weeks ago on Raw, the week prior on Raw. And then she can't beat Nia Jax in a championship match. So again, strike on that. Badly booked. Now eventually, she would beat Charlotte Flair on Monday Night Raw to retain the Raw Women's Championship. But to be honest, and she did defeat Nia Jax on Raw, but she beat Charlotte Flair on Raw because Nia Jax attacked her early in the night. She was selling an injured arm, and Asuka won with the Asuka lock on the injured arm and the injured shoulder. So don't tell me that was completely clean, because it wasn't. She needed an excuse. She needed a pre-existing injury to defeat Charlotte Flair. And she couldn't beat Nia Jax at Backlash either. So she has a second championship defense. It's against Sasha Banks this time at the Horror Show at Extreme Rules. And a horror show it was, not for the good reasons that WWE wanted it to be, for the awful finishes that we saw at that event. We have Sasha Banks versus Asuka. And then we have the screwy finish that I mentioned earlier. Referee bump, miss to the eyes, Bayley counting 1, 2, 3. Sasha Banks the champion. She made Sasha Banks tap out, but then she got pinned by Sasha Banks because of Bayley. Again, my head nearly exploded. You can go back on the watch along and go and have a look at it. What? It didn't make any sense to me. And why? At this point, they're starting to rack up. You have losing to Charlotte Flair on Raw, a screwy finish against Nia Jax at Backlash, where she can't even beat Nia Jax. She then does defeat Charlotte Flair on Raw, but there's a pre-existing injury, so she needed that. She can't beat Sasha Banks at Extreme Rules, screwy finish. And then she loses once again to Sasha Banks this week on Monday Night Raw with another screwy finish. And if you're a casual fan, and people will say, well, you're looking too much into it there. You're zooming in too much where there aren't things there. And they've actually, in those defeats, they've tried to protect Asuka. Because how many clean jobs has she done? And it's not about winning or losing, necessarily. It's the way that she can't beat anyone. No one. If you're a casual fan, and I'm not going to say you believe it's a shoot, because so many people don't now. And look, kayfabe, even though some people actually believe Pat McAfee and Adam Cole is a real thing, kayfabe is dead. And everyone knows the score. Everyone knows it's a work. Everyone knows what's going on. But in terms of the casual fan who doesn't look too deep into things and doesn't know the inner workings of the business or isn't completely smart to the business in what goes on behind closed doors kind of thing, if you see someone that can't beat anyone and they're a champion and they can't beat Nia Jax because it's a count out, they can't beat Sasha Banks because the referee screwy thing, they can't beat Charlotte Flair unless she's injured first, what are you supposed to think? What are you supposed to think of Asuka's capability as a wrestler? What are you supposed to think of Asuka's capability as a champion? The image and the thing that's being put into your head straight away from seeing those performances is, she's not good enough. She's not a good wrestler. She can't beat anyone. Because what evidence is there to tell you otherwise? Nothing. It's honestly, it's one of the worst championship reigns from the women's point of view that there has been, because it was booked terribly. You go from one women's championship reign in Becky Lynch, where she's champion for a year, and in every match she wins. She beats everyone. She beat everyone. That was the point. She beat Shayna Baszler. She beat Asuka. She beat Natalya. She beat Sasha Banks. She beat them all. Everyone. Every single person she went up against, Becky Lynch won. And Becky Lynch is a big star. Why? Because she won every match. That's how you make a big star, especially a big babyface. People will say, well, maybe you're looking over what it was really like at the end of her reign. People were a bit sick of her. People were a bit sick of her at the end of her reign because she constantly won. I think she maybe won too much, but when you're building her up as the man, right? Pun there, see what I did. But when you're building her up, they have to win. I've said this about Drew McIntyre recently as WWE champion. If you're going to make Drew McIntyre the star, if you're going to make Drew McIntyre the guy in WWE, you need to do what you did with John Cena, you need to do what you did with Hulk Hogan, what you did with Steve Austin, whoever. The key thing is they win. That's it. They win, they win, they win. Every time there's a big match, a big opponent, they win. And why is that so important? Because then in the eyes of the audience, you're a winner. You can beat whoever's placed in front of you. You are unstoppable. You are the top of the top in WWE. It doesn't matter necessarily if you're holding the championship or not. What matters is that you win. If you win and win and win, people just assume that you're a winner and you're the guy. But if you lose and you can't beat anyone, people don't believe in you. You're a phony. You can't beat them. You're not legitimate. People don't believe in you and they can't invest in you. Why would little kids want to buy the merchandise of the babyface that can't beat anyone? They're a loser. People would like to buy the merchandise of John Cena because he won all the time. The kids believed in him that he was going to overcome any adversity and any odds that were placed in front of him. Why? Because he always won in the past. So they believe that he's going to continue winning in the future. And that's not the case with Asuka here. What has there been in the past, in recent months, that tells you she was going to beat anyone? Nothing. Because the way that she was booked was stupid and awful. So I wasn't surprised, almost in a sense, that she did lose to Sasha Banks Monday night on Raw, because over the last few months, what's been there to tell you that anything otherwise was going to happen? Nothing. So that's what annoyed me. I'm not necessarily annoyed that Sasha Banks is the Raw Women's Champion. I'm a bit, something in me is a bit like, wow, a SmackDown superstar is Raw Women's Champion. That old wildcard rule's back. But the thing that annoys me the most is the booking of Asuka as champion and the booker of Asuka since winning the championship. She turned into a world champion loser, or certainly a world champion that couldn't beat anyone. It's just a waste. It's just a waste. Now, as far as Sasha Banks, I don't have a problem with Sasha Banks being the champion. Like I said, I'd rather it not be a SmackDown star. But I suppose with the Women's Tag Team Championship, they can appear on every brand, whatever. The brand split means nothing now anyway. Like it ever did, but it doesn't mean anything now anyway. Thoughts on having all the championships on two females? People are going to complain about anything. I don't necessarily have a massive problem with that. You go look back on the two-man power trip in 2001, and they've done other instances of it at the park. Shawn Michaels and Diesel, that kind of thing. Even it never bothered me then. I think it's an interesting sight and an interesting spectacle. I don't think it will last very long anyway. So people that will say, it's all the spotlight's going on them, why didn't it go on other people? I partially agree. Maybe they should be highlighting other people. You've got Twitter saying Naomi deserves a chance, not Naomi deserves to go on Miz TV and then have a terrible segment of Lacey Evans. People want to see different people have a go and have an opportunity. But at the same time, Sasha Banks and Bayley are killing it. And I think it prolongs their eventual breakup, and I think it adds more steam and emphasis to their storyline. So I don't necessarily have a huge problem with that. My problem with all of this is the way that Asuka's been booked. My problem with all of this is how Asuka was booked as Raw Women's Champion. And I think in the same way, and we'll round this out here, that the finishes have been bad recently, have been really bad on WWE television recently. I think this was just another example of not only a bad finish, but continued bad booking when it came to Asuka as Raw Women's Champion. So that's the thing that I think frustrates me the most when it comes to this Asuka situation at the moment. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Sasha Banks being the new Raw Women's Champion and Asuka losing the championship after only a few Raw Women's Championship defenses? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll be sure to respond and reply to all of your comments. I really enjoy interacting with you guys, so I really appreciate anyone that takes the time to leave a comment. If you've enjoyed this video, please do give us a like. Also, it really does help us out. Go up the rankings on YouTube and go into people's recommendation feeds. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to WrestleNews 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. We're closing in, getting so much closer to that 600 subscriber number. We're only about 20 off now, so if you haven't already, please do subscribe. But if you have subscribed to WrestleNews 365, just know that I really do appreciate it. I appreciate everyone that takes the time to either subscribe or just take time out of their day to interact with the video, listen to the video. It really does humble me, and I really, really do appreciate it. So I appreciate everyone for their continued support of the channel. If you want to also, you can follow us on our social media platforms. The handles are on the screen right now. The links are in the description box below. It's at 365Wrestle on Twitter and at WrestleNews365 on Facebook and Instagram. So if you haven't already, please sure to give us a like and a follow there if you wish. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. And I'll speak with you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.